Welcome to Create a Django App. After watching this video, you will be able to describe the Django web app structure and create and run a simple Django web app. Let us look at a typical Django development process. The order of these steps may vary. First, we create a Django project, which is a container for Django apps and settings. Then we create and add one or more Django apps to the project. In core development, we create Django models to model the data and create views to determine which data needs to be presented to the UI. We also map the request URLs to our views so Django can forward requests to corresponding views via URLs. Then we can start designing and building the UI. Once we are confident of the current version, we can perform unit or system tests. After the core development is done, we need to make our Django app production ready, using add-ons such as an admin site or a third-party front-end library. Once we have a working Django app, we can deploy it on a web server, either on-premise or on cloud, and monitor the server status. A Django project is essentially a Python package that contains all the settings for an instance of Django app. To create a Django project, open a command line terminal and run Django-admin start project my site. This initializes a Django project with related files and folders. You need to know the usage for some core files that Django creates. Manage.py is a command line interface used to interact with the Django project to start the server, migrate models, and so on. Settings.py contains the settings and configurations for your Django project. URLs.py contains the URL and routing definitions of your Django app. Once you have created the Django project container, you can add your first Django app to it. We'll call our first app Online Course. From the My Site project directory, run Python manage.py start app online course. Django will create a temporary app structure and some important app files. Admin.py includes everything you need to create and customize an admin site to manage users and content. Models.py contains the data models and ORM. Views.py contains view functions and classes to create views. URLs.py contains the URL declarations and routing for the app. And app.py contains the application configuration class. The migrations folder contains scripts for model migration. Now we add the online course app we just created in our My Site Django project. Open the settings.py file in the My Site folder. Find the installed _apps list in the settings file and add a new entry called onlinecourse.apps.onlinecourseconfig to the list. The online course config is a configuration class that represents the online course app. Now that our app is plugged in, we can optionally set up a database for it. The mysite/settings.py file has a databases dictionary to configure the databases for our app. We add a database instance by adding its connection information such as engine, name, username, and password. Once we have set up our app and database, we can define our Django models as the ORM component between objects and database tables. Let's define a simple course model here with fields like name and description. Next, we'll tell Django we've updated the model by running Python manage.py make migrations online course. Django will then create migration scripts under the migrations folder. To see more details about the SQL statements for the migration, we could run Python manage.py SQL migrate online course 001. Here, an online_course table will be created. Run Python manage.py migrate to run the migration scripts. Next, we create a simple view and a hard-coded HTML template to present the course object. Open the online course/views.py file to add a course_list view function. It accepts an HTTP request object and returns an HTTP response object. First, we get the course object from the database as a course object. Then we create an HTML template and dynamically insert the course name into the placeholder. And finally, we add the completed HTML string as the content of the HTTP response and return it to the UI. Now we associate the course_list view with the URL, so Django will route the request URL to the view to be handled. URL routes are defined in a URL conf file for each app as well as for the Django project. To create a URL conf file for online course app, we first create a urls.py file under online course/folder and then add a path object pointing a URL route to the course_list view we created. The first argument of the path constructor is the route. It defines URL patterns for Django to parse and match from the HTTP request to a view. Here we leave it as empty, meaning the root URL, host/online course, will be mapped to our course_list view. Next, we point the root URL conf file of online course app to the project's root URL conf file. We open the project's URL conf file called mysite/urls.py and add a path object referencing the online course app's URL conf. So, when Django receives any URLs with the suffix online course /, it will try to match any URLs in the online course.urls.py file. And our Django app is set up. Let's check the result. First, we call the Python manage.py run server command line, which will start a development server locally on 127.0.0.1. with default port 8000 for us to host the Django project and app we just created. Once the server starts, we go to the root URL of the online course app. We should see a web page displaying the sentence, "The first course we created is Cloud Application Development with Database." This simple HTML file is generated by the course_list view function we created earlier. In this video, you learned the Django project and app structure and key files, a typical Django app development process, and how to create and run a simple Django app.